And just to be clear about everybody's roles here, Josh Penn was one of the producers, Dan Romer, co-composer, Paul Mazzei, producer on it, and Phil Engelhardt, the director of Cinereach, a very important philanthropic nonprofit, and also executive producer on it. Of course, as you all know, movies are entirely collaborative experience, but I would say Beasts was perhaps even more collaborative than most films are. So I'm going to ask everybody when they intersected, when they first joined the project and what attracted them to it. But I'll just tell you that at Sundance, it came through the Institute, through our lab system, and we're, as you can imagine, so proud about it. Our former executive director, Ken Brecker, always told us that if we're choosing projects that all get made, then we're not doing our job because we're not taking enough risks. So when we look at the 1,000 projects that we look at for each lab and get it down to the 12, you know, we're always thinking, well, this one is so kind of not obvious that maybe this is the one that we're taking the true risk on. And we really felt that way about Beasts, and it makes it even sweeter. You know, it's extraordinary, not only success, but it's the extraordinary realization of the film. So why don't we start with Josh? And Josh, can you tell us about how you came to the project?
Sure. So I've been involved, I guess, since before the script phase. Made a short film with a lot of the same people, with Ben as the director, and just a lot of the team in general. So yeah, I was involved when we were still figuring out which script to write, kind of throughout.
I think I was involved, I guess I signed on to the film in like 2007 when we were working on Glory at Sea. Ben and I co-scored Glory at Sea together, the film Josh was just talking about. And Ben was like, yeah, this is a short, and eventually like we're going to have, you know, we're going to be making a feature with a lot of the same, you know, people on the same concepts. So I guess it was like 2007.
And can you guys, before we get to Paul and Phil, talk about your collective? Like when you say you're making it with the same people, you were in it before the screenwriting process. Can you talk about the origins?
Yeah, we have a collective production company idea, something in the middle of those three things called Court 13, which is a lot of like, friends who, in some form or another, have been making movies for about 9-10 years together. I came in the middle, but it's sort of like an idea of filmmaking, of making movies with your friends, like as a community, kind of going on this adventure together and kind of making the adventure of the films. We hope to expand beyond just filmmaking as well, but everything with that kind of spirit. It's one of those things that's hard to like actualize exactly what it is, but you sort of like know it in your belly. Like you know when something's a Court 13 project, and there's certain people who come and join the Court 13 project, and then they like kind of fill some part of them they didn't know existed, and then they kind of never leave. You kind of just know you'll do the next film project with them too.
How does the project rise to the top of is it through consensus, or does one of the core team members say, oh, I'm writing this, and everybody jumps on board, or? There's
not as formal a process as maybe we should have at this point for that, to be totally honest, but I think our, like with Beasts, it was just clear. I think our hope is to find those projects that it just feels so right that there's like almost no question. And that's sort of how it's worked historically over the years, is like it's all like I don't know if anyone's seen our short film Glory at Sea. It's like this thing in Glory at Sea of someone starts building this crazy boat to sail to find their lost loved ones in the underworld, and it's like a crazy idea, but one person after another keeps showing up and adding things to the boat, and like no one's necessarily like invited, but everyone just like kind of knows they have to join. And that's sort of the way I think maybe it works sometimes with Court 13.
Paul, when did you get involved with this project?
That's probably a good segue, because I actually met Josh and Dan at the Sundance Producers Lab when they had this project, and I think my involvement was gradual. I sort of got sucked in to exactly this spirit. Like there was this sort of really ambitious, almost impossible project, but there's also this group of people with this incredible energy that sort of realized to take on this challenge with no idea that it's impossible at all. It's sort of like this idea being empowered and liberated in this way where you don't create boundaries for what's possible and what you can achieve. And then you just sort of get sucked into that energy and that challenge. And there was something about this film that attracted people from all over to sort of drop what they were doing and participate in making this film. And I also think maybe like the film itself, the theme of the film, like spoke to something like, it didn't feel like a film that was about like sort of looking inward. It was a film that was about embracing something outside of yourself. And I think that was like just something that, like a personal need or creatively, like wanting to be able to participate in something that was bigger than yourself, and that somehow maybe resonated with this idea of empowerment, but empowerment like in a community sense, and empowerment like you live in this country where you feel like everyone else has control of everything, and to be able to like sort of take control and like say, we matter, like we count, we can do what we want, and we can create something that is significant and is meaningful and like somehow is valuable. And I think like that, like being able to be part of that and work with that, and I think, and being able to work with Cinereach, I think was already involved in the project, and somehow it all just sort of coalesced, and it was a great opportunity for me to be able to work with these guys.
Phil, can you talk about when you got involved in the project?
Sure. So a colleague of mine, Mike, saw Glory at Sea, the short film, at South by Southwest, and eventually somehow got a screener and showed it to me, and I think I've never since, or never before, cried as much in front of my staff watching that movie. It was so embarrassing. But it was just, it spoke to how I was blown away, not just by the story, but by, I've not seen that kind of ambition in a short film and that kind of risk-taking in terms of the storytelling. And so we met Ben actually at the Hamptons Film Festival, and then shortly after we met with Josh and Dan here in New York. And the script, it was one of those things, I'm sure you remember too, where a lot of the script, I had no idea what was going on or what that was about and how that was going to happen. But meeting with the producers and with Ben, the level of kind of excitement that they had was so infectious, and we really just felt like this was something that we really wanted to support no matter what happens with the project. But the motivation and the reason behind them wanting to do this project was really aligned with what we wanted to do in terms of supporting ambitious work. And so we got involved, I guess, 2009.
Yeah, I first met you guys in like December of 2008, I think.
2008, yeah. Well, we went down to New Orleans, and that was my first time, and just seeing what they were about in their kind of home turf was, yeah, quite an adventure.
So, Paul and Phil, you have different missions in that you're a nonprofit, and you're running a business that is not nonprofit. And so, what were some of the considerations when you looked at material that didn't look instantly, say, commercial, possibly? Was that daunting, or?
Well, I mean, this project was very specific because I basically came on board to support this venture as a nonprofit venture, so there was never any sort of conflict between those two things. And I think generally, like, I'm not necessarily making films that are where the profit is the bottom line. So generally, I'm looking for the best way to realize the vision of the film and bring supporters to the project that make sense and have sort of the same goals. And sometimes those align perfectly with people who want to invest and make a return, but also have these other added values that they're seeking. Because obviously you want films to reach an audience, so that by definition, hopefully is going to recoup the film. But I'm often not, I mean, there is like intricate legal things you have to consider when you're mixing profit and nonprofit venture, which I've done on a couple of projects. But in terms of choosing a project, it's really sort of irrelevant to me. I mean, I want to feel that the film has an audience, but then in terms of how you structure it, really, I don't think it matters too much. You know, whether you're, I wouldn't choose or not choose a project because it was a for-profit or nonprofit.
At Sundance, we always try to direct our filmmakers to people who are going to embrace their vision and make it all happen. So, two of the most meaningful people that we try to hook our filmmakers up with are Phil and Paul. So I want to know, Josh, did you have a strategy? Did you guys have like, okay.
That's a very good strategy for any.
But did you have that strategy before? Like when you, as a collective, were thinking, okay, how now do we roll this boulder up the hill? What's our next move? Who do we align ourselves with? what kind of thinking were you doing?
I mean, we were lucky that CineReach found us early enough before we were even in the process of like thinking. We were still figuring out like really what the movie we wanted to make was, and so in that case we were lucky that we didn't have to play the whole game of like trying to figure out how you find someone who wants to help you make a insane risky film. And I think we went to the Sundance lab. Ben had done the screenwriters labs, which was one of the like things that really pushed us to make the film. Like, I mean, the funny thing, but Ben got a call from the lab saying like, "Do you have a script? We saw your short. We'd like you to submit for the labs." And he said yes, because he said when Sundance calls, you say yes. But he didn't actually have a written script, and like they gave him like, he had to turn something in like 3 weeks or something. He just like furiously wrote for 3 weeks. And then he had done it and had this incredible experience. So Jandy and I, my producing partner, one of my producing partners, decided to apply for the producing labs, just knowing that like what you guys did in all those programs is pretty incredible, but not necessarily thinking we'd be able to actually get someone like Paul to join our team, just thinking we'd maybe be able to pick someone like Paul's brain for 5 days. That seemed like a good idea. And then once we actually met Paul, there was like, which was like, I remember there was a thing where like you talked about story a lot, and Paul had read the script before, and everyone had read the script, and Paul would like tell us about our movie and be like, "Yeah, that's the movie we want to make. We've been trying to describe." But like, he was able to like, he like got it so inherently, and it was just like such a clear match. But I think strategically, there's a lot of those two things we didn't do strategically. I think there was probably a lot of other things along the way of similar nature that we really thought a lot about, but we were lucky enough to have those things kind of happen so naturally.
So, at the lab, we do a lot of follow-up. As we say, coming to the lab as a filmmaker is only the beginning of Sundance's involvement with the film. We see many rough cuts and give a lot of input, bring the creative advisors back. And I remember seeing one rough cut where we sat down with them and said, you have to cut way back on the oryx. We get the idea, you don't need it, it's like overwhelming. And then they're like, no, I think we'll put in more. And they were so right, so right. So, okay, you meet these guys are your champions, and then what happened? Can you talk about how you put it together, both financially and, how you decided, okay, this is the moment where we can go, we have enough support and enough creative buy-in and financial buy-in?
Yeah, I mean, so we ended up developing it about full-time, pretty much full-time for about a year. And there's lots of different drafts of the script.
With input from these guys?
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. So we started with CineReach. I mean, I think we had the lab first draft, which was first draft is generous. I think at that point, it was like it's very different than what the movie ended up becoming. So CineReach was giving notes from everything, creative. We're starting to figure out how we're going to actually make the movie. We're, figuring out things like how to do the aurochs, and if that's an okay way to do it, if we're going to do non-actors or actors. And Paul came on that summer and immediately became like a huge, huge asset, and that none of us had ever done before. I mean, from producing side, it was all of our first films. It's been the director's first film. It was CineReach's real first foray into taking on something so fully. And Paul came with like, not to embarrass you, I'm a little embarrassed, but he's someone who's made a lot of films who has kind of kept that like energy in filmmaking and like anything's possible attitude, and like had like kind of the morals and like just like general way we want to do things is something he's really stuck with, which I think is really hard to do probably on movie number 10 sometimes. I think sometimes like the process wears you down. So we were able to go with him and say, we have this huge idea that's like kind of naive, maybe a little crazy and ambitious. We're not sure exactly how we're going to do it. And he would kind of help us take the idea, keep the most essential elements of it, but also figure out how to make it real and ground us a little bit and guide us, but let us still kind of take the reins and learn, rather than, which was really, really helpful. So almost all processes were we're really done as a team.
So you were giving drafts of the scripts to both of them, and were you guys talking? Did you guys interact when it came time to give notes? What was your process?
Well, we knew each other before Beasts, and I remember actually getting a call from Paul being like, "What the hell didn't you guys tell me about this project?" But I didn't. I just didn't know. Yeah, whatever. But I remember just specifically, like, I think, yeah, as the script drafts were coming and Ben was going through the labs, I think we were coming up with a kind of a really cool development kind of schedule and development budget, and we kind of were going through the script and the whole idea and picking out kind of elements that we wanted kind of proof of, like, how you're going to do this.
And when you say proof?
I mean, I remember there was like a underground baby race in the tunnels on tricycles, and we were like, all right, well, show us how you're going to do that. And they did, even though it didn't make it into the final film. But so I forget exactly but it was like a whole huge binder that you guys delivered to us, with just every single detail of, like, where are the locations, where's the crew going to be, how are we going to do this shot, how are we going to make these, aurochs come to life.
Yeah, it was a really nice process in a lot of ways, because there was never a point where there was any kind of voice saying, no, that what you're saying you can do is impossible, or like, don't, like, no one in our internal team ever said, like, with the aurochs, like, go make these CGI, which is, I think, probably what 98% of people in the film industry would probably suggest there. It's like, that's how you make beasts at this point. But they would say, like, yeah, we'll make this movie with you, and you guys can do it, but, like, we're not going to go and totally blind. You have to come in with a plan. So I remember it was January 2010. It was right actually before we went to Sundance Film Festival. I think was our deadline to get it in. We like huddled up in what was eventually our headquarters down the bayou, and just wrote out this like 100-page binder. It was like section on auroch, section on like school boat, on acting. You know, it was like each and everything. It was really helpful for us, because it forced us to actualize those things as much as possible. You have to write it down and like brainstorm as a team at that point. And we got through a lot of like things that I think normally get pushed to pre-production and development through that kind of process, which is incredibly necessary for this film, because a lot of these problems were not problems you can figure out.
I mean, the idea of building the Bible was, like, when you looked at this film, it could be anything. And, like, we had no idea what it was going to cost or how you were going to get there. So the idea was to begin to build parameters that we could all agree on that protected the vision of the film, but we could actually choose a path for certain things that made sense, and that we could then have some idea of what they would cost, and some idea of how we were going to get there within the time. There was, obviously, once you're filming, you have limited days, limited money, limited resources. We wanted to make sure that we were well planned enough and had made key decisions, that we knew what the parameters, how to provide for those decisions. Because I think what was critical for us as producers is, if we're going to split this project, we want to make sure it gets made and that it actually sets out to achieve what these guys are trying, what they want this film to be. And therefore, like, that was all about focusing into, like, okay, let's go from the abstract grand idea into an actual practical application of how we're going to achieve that, and then let's budget that out, plan it, and then all agree that that's actually what we're going to do. Because I think on your prior films, I don't want to misspeak, but it felt like you just sort of started working, and then a bunch of people showed up, and you kept working, and you had no idea how long it was going to take, how much it was going to cost, or when it might be completed. I think that was sort of an impossibility for us, not because we didn't want to support it, but just because we wanted to make sure if we're supporting this, part of our responsibility is the success of the film. And we want to make sure it can get completed and actually live up to what the potential for that story and the vision for that story would be.
So how did you work with them? Did you look through the Bible and say, not possible, possible, not possible, possible? Or
no,
did you?
We all worked
on it together.
This was something that was multiple conversations. We divided down all the different elements of what the film would be. The idea of the Bible came from our discussions. It's like, okay, there are all these unknowns. Let's look at all these unknowns. Let's look at all these key decisions, and let's actually map out maybe 2 or 3 ways we could go with casting. 2 or 3 ways we can go with this. Like, how are we going to deal with these situations? Kids, water, animals, explosions, aurochs. And there was a bunch of stuff in the script that was like part of it's like the director has an idea and there's a way to execute that idea. And maybe having kids race around underground tunnels is one way to execute that idea, but there might be another way to execute the idea. And as you look through and you realize like that that's actually going to maybe not achieve what we want because it's either going to get too complicated or we're actually not going to be able to pull it off, then you might substitute, oh, but this other thing becomes more important, and actually we can incorporate the spirit of what that was going to present into this other moment, you know, and therefore some other moment becomes more important, and we protect what was essential about that story element, but without like just blindly saying if we don't have a tunnel that goes under the then we can't make this movie, you know, and then it derails the process. So this was all about embracing the challenge, but also saying there's so much uncertainty, and you can't go into a project with complete uncertainty. You know, you need to have at least one plan where you know you can get from the start to the finish.
Right. But it was really, I don't think there was anything in this movie where, like, there was something put out like that where it was just like the answer was that's impossible, let's move on. It was always like,
yeah,
it was like we're working together, and we figured out, I think we figured out how to do everything we actually really want. Like the detail, like that scene didn't end up making the movie, but it wasn't just because it was underwater tricycles. It was also like it didn't
Really?
end up fitting. Like
Yeah,
it didn't end up
yeah.
being the most essential thing, and it was gonna take a huge amount of time, and, you know. But there were things that were harder to figure out that we felt were more essential, so we found the solution.
And so things kind of fell by the wayside, but not because, like you're saying, not because we said, oh, that's impossible, we can't do that. More like, you know what, actually, this is more important, and let's focus on this. And maybe that, and so things just sort of became less interesting or fell by the wayside, or Ben and you guys became less obsessed about because.
And what was interesting kind of about the process and the development process and pre-production process too is it was really like, and you can speak more to this, but we were setting up this like months-long or several months-long summer camp, and there had to be activities, and we had to like plan all these things because once summer camp started, it was just kind of happening. And so there was a lot of production going in, pre-production going into kind of setting up what Ben always calls like this like chaos, and then see what happens. And so yeah.
But you had.
But it gave us, from Synergy's side at least, it gave us a lot of comfort that, okay, we have contingency plans and we know what's going on, and if we get rained out, we can move and we can, yeah, it's all
I mean,
fine.
I think and Paul spoke to this a little bit, but we made the short film that keeps coming up, Glory at Sea, we made, and it was like truly sort of anarchy. Like it was making that film.
Anarchy in a good way?
It was really fun. It was not efficient. We ended up getting a film that we really loved out of it, and like had a great time making it most of the time. Sometimes it wasn't as fun because it was chaos. But we made it, and there was something in that process and in the final product that came from that process that we really loved, that we wanted to hold on to. But we also, having been through it and just like stepping back a little bit and not just saying we made a film we like and so let's just do it exactly the same again, we knew that if we tried to do that on a bigger scale, feature scale, that film just would not like get done. And it was just leaving too much to good fortune. So we spent, I mean, that development year, it was just constantly trying to figure out how to, like, what pieces of that can we hold on to while putting it in an infrastructure that allows it to get done and allows us to have a schedule and a plan that we stick to and not need to stop after like 6 times during production and start over again.
And the music is such an important part of this. I'm interested to hear, when did you guys start thinking and writing the music?
Well, Ben and I both kind of like, you know, this is the third film we scored together, so, you know, we're pretty used to working with each other, and we actually just kind of came together and started writing kind of, you know, when we started scoring, and we really wrote all the music, all the actual melodies in about 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
And then like scored the entire film. This is our first feature that either of us have scored. Scored the entire film together over the course in MIDI with electronic orchestral samples. We scored the entire thing probably in like 2 or 3 weeks, and then kind of took a break for Ben to go do other stuff. Came back, and we then like kind of rescored the entire film after watching it, just going back and like kind of changing every cue. And it was about probably like 4 of those revisions all the way through, kind of just like going in and like changing everything. And then by the end, you know, we spent a good like probably 8 weeks together writing and arranging, and then we spent about 10 days recording it, which were like 20-hour recording sessions every day.
But there was quite a long before you actually started writing, there was an incubation period about like trying to figure out what is the main theme, like what's sort of the anthem of the film, and also understanding, I think, that there were certain things that you guys wanted the music to serve in the story, and that they were essential to the story. It wasn't like the music came as an afterthought. It's like, oh, we made the film, now let's add music. It was really like there were places where the film was only going to work with music, and that was understood from the beginning that this section, this thing is going to be about the music, or the music is going to be an essential voice in that section. And so you guys were talking about like, okay, what are those themes? What are those, like there's the anthem that opens up the community, that gives you a sense of like, this is a community that's proud of itself and that comes together. And so that first cue representing this, like you get this feeling of like pride, or I don't know what you guys called the national anthem or whatever it was.
We call it the traditional.
The traditional.
Yeah.
But you kind of went through it. So we need this element, we need this, we need the theme, we need the traditional, we need, and you reached out to have the Cajun element.
Yeah.
And so there was a period, it seems like, where you guys sort of mapped out, like, here's the essential things we're going to need the score to do.
Yeah. I mean, we wrote like, in the first 4 days or so, we wrote like 5 or 6 themes, and then kind of went through the entire film and was like, this, we don't know how we're going to do it exactly, but this section needs, like, every theme represented some sort of situation or emotion. Like, we need this theme over this part, we need this theme over this part, and sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. But yeah, I mean, Ben, since Ben is a composer as well as a director and writer, I feel like while he was in the editing process, and probably in the film process as well, was thinking to himself, like, how is music going to carry this part? Like, there's certain sections that you watch without music, and they don't 100% make sense. And then when you put the music in, that kind of guides you, guides your eye to the right thing, or guides your emotion to the right thing, scenes start making more sense. And I think that Ben purposely leaves out certain information so that the music will, the music is allowed to have that role.
I just wanted to add that we should add, I don't know if people are aware, but like we did have a very long post process on this project. I think we edited for 1.5 years. Or the whole post process was a year.
And can you talk about that? Like, you shot it and under,
Yeah, I mean, we shot it and we did not expect it to take that long, but it was, I think it was probably one of the best decisions we made on the film. Just partially, like, we just wanted to make sure we got it right, and like sometimes that takes time, but also just by nature of what Ben's process was, like, we needed to try a bunch of different ways. We had, I don't know, we all probably watched, and we didn't see everything there. That we weren't sitting over their shoulder, but we probably just saw 20 cuts of film or something. But yeah, there was things that were working, but it wasn't completely there. It just needed.
It sounds like such a, warm harmonic convergence of happenstance. Can you talk about, were there painful, what was the most painful, like, we think this might not happen moments? Were there any?
I think there was points in post where it got scary that we thought we maybe didn't have the movie we had hoped we were shooting and that we had been writing. But as a team, we kind of kept the faith that instead of just like, throwing in the towel and saying, well, let's just do with this what we can, we at that point would push ourselves a little harder and try some new tactic or bring in someone new with fresh ideas, and who hadn't been just sitting there like staring at it, which made a lot of difference. And we also set up I think we set it up so post would cost, like just the weekly cost of like extending for a week would not be a big thing, which I think was very essential, because sometimes post can be like, it's a disaster if you go 2 weeks over, and for us it was like Ben was willing to, eat ramen noodles and just keep editing on his personal laptop.
I think that was true throughout, like the cost, like we had a huge development period and we had a significant shooting period and a long post period, but the idea was always to like have the minimum of overhead, like keep costs low, so because we need time to experiment. I think one thing that, like the idea of like discovery, being able to experiment and discover throughout the process of making a film was something that was sort of essential, and whether we realized that after the fact I think that's what happened. We had a long development process where we were experimenting and be able to explore ideas that came up with solutions that you might not have been able to do under different time constraints. And even in the process of shooting, we were embraced to like new discoveries that we could then incorporate into the film. And in the post, it didn't end there. It was like you still were, the story could change and evolve even during post. I think Cinereach was really supportive of this idea, like, don't settle. Like, let's really figure this out. Let's make as strong a film as we can, and never came in the idea of, like, let's settle for something that's kind of working, but maybe, you know, until we really have explored everything and really feel like we've made the film we wanted, we didn't want to. And that was great to have that support.
One, it felt like we were all, it was so important to really understand each other and understand the kind of intention behind things, because I remember we were aiming for Sundance 2010, 2011, and I remember like there was a certain point in the fall we were watching cuts, and like there was this unspoken kind of message of like, this is gonna happen, like, we're not. But like no one was gonna say that, because you know we were like, this is the schedule, whatever, and then like eventually it was just kind of like,
Not to a year later.
like, no, it wasn't. We actually we came together and we said, no, listen, like we need more time, and it was just kind of this like embrace of like, yes, and like we're all.
Well,
But
that's a gift.
This is something like we're all, that I really, really value about this team is like for all of us, like for young filmmakers, we're like waiting a year to put out your first film is a hard thing. Usually from like you have some kind of company pushing you to just get it out in the world as big as possible. And one of the really nice things of this team is like on the most important level, we were all on the same page. We didn't have to spend our energy on like those kind of things that don't matter as much, and we were able to like all kind of be a team on just pushing towards the things that really matter.
I think we have very little time left, so we're going to take some questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions? And there are mics there, so if you want to.
What was the budget?
It's about $1.5 million. But that I always cringe giving that answer because I don't know how relevant it necessarily is. Like part of what we did was try to not necessarily use the way, like if you look at our budgets, split up differently than most budgets would be. Like we tried to take as much of it and put it on screen. And the way, I mean, one of the main ways the movie really got done and is like this is there was like hundreds of people who went well below their like even favor rate sometimes, and just did it because they really wanted to do it. And basically the entire, I mean, for anyone who's seen the movie and sat through the credits, they go on for like 6 minutes, and it's like all these people just like poured themselves into it at some point in the process. Some of them for 3 years, some of them for a month, but everyone was like just giving to it. And so the movie was really done on that kind of energy.
You figured out what it would be if you included it in time?
That's sort of been on my to-do list for a while.
But I think that was part of like the people who came, like we purposely didn't reach out to like bring on like a big wig where it was about the money, because I think the idea is like the passion. We knew this was gonna be a long haul, and we needed people who like had an incentive to do this that was about also making something special that and the work itself and the reward of that work. And obviously we included everyone in the success of the film, but like really we weren't in the position to like sort of package this project and throw money around, because we knew that we needed time and we needed people who were willing to like go to the nth degree, and we're excited about that challenge of all the problems that this film presented, all these challenges were exciting and like were fulfilling of themselves in terms of personal growth as well.
We had about 100 people come down to the bayou to shoot the film, which is pretty large for an independent film, but you know, it's literally every single phone call was us being like, so we're making this crazy thing in the bayou, we want you to move down there for 4 months, you're gonna get paid very little, like it's gonna be very long days, very long hours, like housing's gonna be a little weird, but it's gonna be adventure, it's gonna be really fun, and it'll probably be unlike anything you've ever done. And like a lot of people would say, you know, thanks but no thanks, which you know, I get it. Like I get why that's not for everyone, but everyone who did come down, like I think got what they were getting into and was excited about it. And a lot of them would then be like, oh, I have this other friend who is also like looking to do that kind of things with their life, and maybe they, have some experience with model building or had worked on a boat before, something like that.
So I have another question. When you sent the cut you sent to Sundance, how did you feel about that? Did you think like, okay, I've just sent in a game-changing film and there's going to be this amazing thing that happens, or were you confident and thrilled with what you had?
Well, when we were aiming for Sundance 2010, we actually never sent in a cut. We had applied, but we never sent in a cut, and then we withdrew because we were just not ready. So we needed that time to get to a place where we felt as confident with the film, even though none of the film was not done.
Yeah, we would have very, very happily taken a few extra months on that deadline. I mean, we finished the film 2 days before premiere.
And did you feel, was it just the fog of war, or did you feel like when you sent it in, you thought like, okay, I'm so happy with what we have, all of you?
In January.
Yeah.
I think we still would have taken two extra months, but we were at that point we were very, very happy with the film. But it had been a mad rush, like the last few months of finishing sound and VFX and color was pretty intense. I mean, I was probably working 18, 19-hour days. Ben was working like 20, 21-hour days for a good while. I mean, one of the things that like amazed me about Ben is he would have what he called first period, which would be like he would be editing with our editors. Then second period, he would go work with Dan from like he would show up at your house like 10 p.m. or something, and 8 p.m. to like 2 a.m. And then after that, he would go do everything else. He like and deal with his emails and everything else. It was pretty crazy.
Well, actually, during the bulk of the recording process, Ben was at my studio from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. He would sleep there too, obviously. But we were working 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. on the score. But while we were working the score, he was on the couch with our editor with one headphone on editing. And then whenever he heard anything that he had to talk about with me, he would stop editing and talk with me about music.
Literally, he was picking ADR cues with one ear and giving notes on the score. It was actually the most impressive thing I think I've ever seen anyone do. He was giving good notes on both of them simultaneously. It was just something I could never do.
Is there another question from the?
Yeah, my question would be stupid 2 years ago, but why did you choose to shoot in 16 years?
I think for us, I think there's something like so organic about it that just felt right for the story. Like we wanted to feel grounded and kind of earthy. And it's just beautiful. I mean, things just feel so warm. I think that was the main thing. I think there was also something, like we worked with all non-actors in the film. And so your first instinct would be that you probably would want to just be able to keep rolling, but there's also sometimes problems in just being able to press record forever. And so that as like a limitation was good. And then also we want to shoot natural light a lot. We didn't want to want to be able to build like 360 degree sets with a lot of natural light as opposed to like major lighting setups that would kind of take the actors out of the film, and you have a lot more leeway with film than digital to just use natural light.
And I mean, we did do tests, I remember Red, and we looked at some other formats, and the style kind of was definitely a key in terms of choosing 16, but I remember also the locations and how we were shooting in the water and everything else. We couldn't bring hard drives with us. We couldn't bring all of these things with us, and so 16 was really made it the easiest in terms of physically. Like what
the
was
Red
possible.
also would have actually killed our DP because he was shooting everything down here. The Red's so heavy that it would have actually thrown out his back.
A question there?
Yes, I think a lot of us could understand how to save money, maybe on pre-production. We do it all before we even get to the point of production, but it's the post. You said somehow you figured out a way where you didn't have to be jeopardized by, we need another week, and having the budget just kill you. How did you do that?
I mean, like part of what I said before with the crew, one of the ways we were able to ask everyone on our crew, ask, second AC to come down and work for nothing was he was getting paid the same amount as our director.
So you had like a set rate,
there was
no matter how long this takes, you're going to get $4 or whatever.
No, it wasn't. It was like a weekly rate, but it was a very low week. It was like everything was like, how can you just like survive on a very base level? And then like we bought our editing, it's just Final Cut system and Core 13 bought it because we didn't want the variable to be like, if we go a week over where everything's falling apart, it makes it, whenever things cannot be a variable in budgeting, I think it's much better. Things don't spiral out of control and you know exactly what you have in your hands.
Did you cut on 7 or 10, final cut?
7.
Yeah.
I think something that's important to know about it is that I feel like everybody who worked on the film would have actually done it for free. At the end of the day, I mean, if they were asked, you know, would you rather have this money, or, you know, if we're going to take the film away from you, would you rather have the film? I think every single person who worked on the film down in the bayou and up in New York, we were all just like, this is just what our life is. This is what we're doing. We're making Beasts of the Southern Wild. And at the end of the day, it didn't have to do with money. It had to do with just caring about the project.
So you had your laptops, you were cutting there, and then at the point where, we all get to the point where it starts really costing a lot, where you're color correcting, you're getting it, but you did everything you possibly could on your laptops, in your houses, before you...
Yeah, I mean, the color correction stuff was always there,
Yeah.
and we just didn't start it until we were ready. So it was really the only thing that was going on in that really year or so, year and a few months, was the editing.
Yeah.
And
We have
Yeah,
time.
and all the
Thank you.
posts, we wait until we lock picture. So we're not doing the color corrector or sound conforms or sound design until the picture is like finished.
But that,
You know,
just
gen-
one more quick example, sorry. With our VFX, which like VFX are an ungodly cost generally in the film industry because they're mainly made for Iron Man 2. We found a program in San Francisco, a school called AAU, where it's like the most senior class. It's all the kids who go to work at ILM like a year later. They take on indie films for free and do it for the experience and the credit, and they like treat you as if they're a like VFX house, and they take it very, very seriously. But it saved, you know, so it was a lot of just like getting ahead of the problem, trying to find those things in the world. And those things are out there if you search, but they take time and a lot of research.
We have time for one more question.
Todd, did you audition locals, and particularly how did you find the girl?
Yeah, we looked only basically in Louisiana. We did a little bit of looking at actors in New York, but didn't end up using any of them. So everyone in the film is a non-actor from Louisiana. And for Hush Puppy, we saw about 4,000 girls across the state. And it was, you know, we went to every school and met every principal and asked to hold after-school auditions. We went to every supermarket and library and community center and posted flyers. And the whole thing was aiming to reach people and say, like, you don't need to have ever thought about acting before. You don't need to act before. If you fall in this age range and you're a girl, come in and audition. And we wanted to find someone who was just inherently kind of special and had it in them, not someone who was necessarily trained.
So, well, thank you guys for an extraordinary film.